the news.
There have been some clashes between police and protesters in Athens tonight. It followed the vote in Parliament to approve the government's austerity plan in return for a multi-billion euro bailout from the EU and the IMF. As protesters rallied outside the Parliament, some pelted a police cordon with bottles and stones. The police fired tear gas to disperse them. Earlier during the afternoon, thousands protested peacefully, many chanting their opposition to the bill. The law paves the way for 30 billion euros worth of tax hikes, pension reforms and deep cuts in public sector bonuses, which will reduce take-home pay for an estimated fifth of the workforce. In return, Greece will receive aid in loans of 110 billion euros over 3 years, 80 billion from other EU states, the rest from the International Monetary Fund. Before the vote in Parliament, Prime Minister George Papandreou said there was no time to lose in reforming Greece's broken economy, whose debt and deficit problems had triggered a wider crisis threatening the entire Eurozone. The government won the vote, although 3 socialist MPs refused to support the bill. They've been expelled from the government's team. Meanwhile, people in Athens have flocked to lay flowers at the site of the bank where 3 employees were killed in a petrol bomb attack during protests on Monday.
All of Britain's main party leaders have voted as millions of people across the UK go to the polls in the country's general election. Conservative David Cameron was the first out the blocks, casting his vote in his Oxfordshire constituency. The Tory Supremo remains slight favourite to take the top prize after a hard-fought electoral campaign. But the UK's current Prime Minister Gordon Brown has been determined not to go down without a fight. The Labour chief voted in his Scottish Kirkcaldy constituency with wife Sarah shortly after his Conservative challenger. The final result is expected to be a photo finish, with most polls leading up to the vote predicting a hung Parliament. Such an outcome could result in either Cameron or Brown being forced to form a coalition with potential kingmakers and Britain's third party, the Liberal Democrats. Their leader, Nick Clegg, was the last of the 3 party heads to cast his vote in Sheffield. He has said it would be difficult to do a deal with Brown if Labour finished third, but has not ruled out an alternative Labour leader. It's almost 2 decades since the landscape of British politics looks so uncertain. Polls only give an inkling of the final outcome. But how could the result alter Britain's ties with Brussels? Our special correspondent in London, Keith Graves, has more.
This election has been fought largely on domestic issues, but whoever forms the next government is going to have to put their minds very quickly to their relationship with Europe, especially in the light of the EU Commission's comments on the eve of the election that unless Britain takes drastic action to handle its mounting debt, this country's finances by the end of the year will be in a worse state than any other major European nation, and they included Greece in that list. But there are other problems in the relationship with Europe for any new government. For example, if there's a coalition between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, they differ sharply in their approach to immigration, to European defence and to sovereignty issues. And if Mr Cameron of the Conservatives, as seems likely, is the next Prime Minister, either alone or in a coalition government, he wants to wrest back from Brussels more control over Britain's affair, especially on immigration and law and order. And he would introduce to Parliament a sovereignty bill to do that. That would not go down well with Brussels. And so there are problems ahead.
For the British people, the term hung Parliament sounds rather alarming. It means that no one party secures an overall majority in the general election, resulting in a deadlock. The last time the country faced an inconclusive result after a general election was nearly 4 decades ago.
Look at that face, that pretty much says it all, doesn't it? He's very excited to be here, and neck, of course, with Mr Clegg.
In short, Britain's ruling Labour Party could come third in terms of votes, but still retain the most seats in Parliament.
Jobs at risk immediately.
Not a Tory. The Conservatives need to secure a 10-point lead over Labour to win an outright majority.
He's probably a Tory now, so are half the country.
Meanwhile, the rise of the Liberal Democrats has added a new dimension to what is usually a two-horse race. It all sounds rather complicated, but the British electoral system is actually rather simple. With 650 seats up for grabs in Parliament, a party will only win a seat if its candidate gets the most votes in a single constituency. Labour will forfeit its current absolute majority if it loses 24 seats. Meanwhile, the Tories need to gain 116 seats for an outright win. Anything in between would result in a stalemate.
Party political wrangling will dominate, and policies will be...
This video from the Conservatives warns that the reality of a hung parliament would be a paralysed government. A coalition between the winners and the Liberal Democrats might avoid this situation, but seems unlikely as it would involve difficult compromises on both sides.
James Harold Wilson, 31,767.
The last hung parliament was in 1974, when the Conservatives won the most votes but fewer seats than Labour.
I can remember the last one we had over there 30 years ago, and boy, is it lively. In that case, Clegg would be able to say, well, perhaps we will support the Labour Party, but not with Gordon Brown if you don't mind. Let's have somebody else.
Just a few short weeks ago, Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg was barely on the radar. Now he's being hailed as the kingmaker who could make or break the election.
Anti-EU politician Nigel Farage has been injured after his light aircraft crashed as he campaigned for votes on British general election day. Farage, an MEP and member of the United Kingdom Independence Party, was planning to fly across central England with a UKIP banner flowing behind the aircraft. It's believed the banner became entangled in the plane's engine, bringing it down in Northamptonshire, north of London.
You know, really, you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk.
The pilot and politician were hurt as a result of the accident, but both men are said to be in a comfortable condition.
In a new twist to the oil rig disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, an environmental group has said that British Petroleum was exempted by US regulators from a normally required impact study for its exploration project. The Centre for Biological Diversity said the government service involved gave BP a categorical exclusion from full analysis. The governor of Florida, one of the states on the Gulf, is no longer such an offshore drilling fan.
Well, we need oil, but we don't need it from the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, I just flew over it again yesterday. It's the second time I've done so. And when you see the devastation and the enormity of the size of that thing, it's just unbelievable.
A concrete and steel box trap has been built the size of a 4-story building. This will be lowered 1,500 meters to the seabed, perhaps by this weekend. The plan is to capture some of the around 800,000 liters per day of escaping oil. The U.S. Interior Department approved the exploration project 1 year ago. The environmentalist whistleblowers said the Obama administration rubber-stamps hundreds of Gulf drilling plans every year.
2 weeks after a deadly blast on a drilling rig unleashed a massive oil leak in the Gulf of Mexico, BP remains under pressure to limit the ecological and economic damage. The cost to the energy giant is steadily mounting. Oil expert Kevin Saville says this ruins the industry's reputation.
The last thing that they want to see, the industry being, is images on TV of oiled birds and sea turtles and people cleaning these beautiful beaches of the Gulf Coast.
As well as BP and the driller Transocean, the Gulf region's fishing and tourism industries will suffer financially, but environmental cleanup, alternative energy and safety technology firms could gain.
Anyone who is involved in manufacturing or fabricating these kind of advanced safety processes and procedures certainly would benefit.
Cleanup and compensation claims will likely cost BP around €7 billion, but its shares have tumbled, wiping around €25 billion off its market value.
The US Vice President Joe Biden has begun a visit to Europe by warning of new threats facing the continent. He received a warm welcome to the European Parliament to deliver the first speech by a top US leader for 25 years. Earlier he'd said no European country was sheltered from rogue states and the constant terrorist threat. Biden told MEPs that Iran's actions risk starting a new nuclear arms race in the Middle East, adding that the US and Europe needed each other more than ever.
The Obama-Biden administration has no doubt about the need for and strongly supports a vibrant European Union. We believe it's absolutely essential to American prosperity and long-term security. So have no doubt about that.
The Vice President said he understood European concerns over transfers of EU personal data to the US via the Brussels-based SWIFT company as part of anti-terrorism measures. Earlier this year, MEPs blocked an agreement over its use. Biden said the program was essential for US security.